Imagine being just 6 years old. One moment you're playing the park, and the next, you're gone. No trafe, no witnesses, just silence. That was the story of Luis Armando Albino, a little boy who vanished in 1951 from the streets of Oakland, California. For over 70 years, his name faded from headlines, but never from the hearts of those who loved him. His mother held on to hope until the day she died. Investigators hit dead ends. Time moved on, but Luis was still out there, living an entire life under a name he didn't choose, in a family he didn't know wasn't his. And then, in 2024, everything changed. A single DNA test unraveled a mystery older than most of us. What if the person you've been looking for is still alive and doesn't even know they were lost? This is not fiction. This is the real story of a child stolen by time and found by science. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share this story. Because what you're about to hear is proof that some miracles just take longer than others. The disappearance. It was May 1949, Oakland, California. A warm spring afternoon. The kind of day when the world feels safe. When children run free in the sun, and no one imagines that danger could be hiding just around the corner. 6-year-old Luis Armando Albino had been playing near DeFremery Park. He was a joyful, curious boy, one of 6 siblings, known for his energy, his laughter, and the way he clung to his mother's hand whenever they walked to the corner store. On this day, though, he was alone for just a moment that would stretch into decades. Witnesses recalled seeing a woman approach Luis. She was a stranger, but friendly. She spoke softly. She offered candy. In 1951, people didn't think twice about small talk with a child. It was a different time, but that innocence was about to be shattered. Within minutes, Luis was gone, vanished without a trace. No one saw a struggle. No one heard him cry out. The woman and the boy simply disappeared into the hum of an ordinary day. His mother, Elena Albino, was frantic. She reported him missing immediately. Police launched a citywide search. Flyers were posted on telephone poles. Radio bulletins broadcast his name. Neighbors knocked on doors, peering into sheds and basements, calling out into night. But no clues surfaced. No bodies. No ransom. Nothing to explain the sudden silence of a once lively child. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into years. And all that remained was a fading photograph and a mother's unbreakable grief. Authorities suspected kidnapping, but they couldn't prove it. At the time, child abduction cases often went cold quickly if there were no witnesses or leads. Technology was limited. Databases didn't exist. The only thing they had was hope. Elena Albino never gave up. She kept Luis's school clothes in his drawer. She saved his toys, dusting them weekly as if he might return to play with them at any moment. On his birthday, she baked him a cake. She sat at the table with her other children, always setting one extra plate. But as years passed, Luis's name faded from the news. The world moved on. Other tragedies filled the headlines. But for the Albino family, time stopped in 1951. They lived each day wondering, was he alive? Was he hurt? Did he even know he was lost? They never knew the truth, that Luis hadn't died, that he wasn't even far. He was alive, just under a different name, living a different life. But back then, all anyone knew was that he was gone. This was not a runaway, not a custody dispute. This was a child stolen by a stranger, ripped from the arms of a loving family. And for over 70 years, no one knew what really happened to Luis Armando Albino. A life unknown. Luis Albino should have grown up surrounded by his brothers and sisters. He should have had birthday parties with chocolate cake, arguments over who got the last cookie, and sleepy car rides with his mom after church. But instead, his childhood was erased. And in its place, a new life was written by strangers. After he was taken, Luis was given a different name, a different home, a different identity. The woman who abducted him didn't just steal him. She rewrote his entire history. And the most tragic part? He had no idea. To Luis, there was nothing unusual about his life. He believed the people raising him were his real family. There were no hints, no strange stories, No clues that he had once belonged to someone else. The memory of his real family, blurred by time and trauma, was buried so deep that he never questioned his past. As he grew up, he followed the path so many young men took. He enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. He served his country with honor, completely unaware that he himself had once needed to be rescued. After his service, he became a firefighter, a protector. He risked his life to save others from flames and wreckage, never knowing that his own life had begun in the shadows of crime. He built a career, formed friendships, earned respect, and lived decades carrying a name that didn't belong to him. Think about that for a moment. Imagine looking at your own reflection and having no idea that the person in the mirror is someone else, that your name, your family, even your childhood, were all stolen before you ever had a chance to hold on to them. Luis lived a full life. He married. He had children of his own. He paid taxes, celebrated holidays, watched the world change around him, just like the rest of us. He grew old without ever knowing that somewhere in another part of the country, people were still searching, still hoping. For his family in Oakland, time was marked by absence. Every year that passed was another without answers. Luis's mother, Elena, never stopped believing he was alive. She died in 2005, heartbroken, never learning the truth. But she passed that hope down to her children, and eventually her grandchildren. One of those grandchildren, Luis's niece, became curious about her roots. In 2023, she took a DNA test through a popular genealogy website. Like millions of others, she wanted to build a family tree. But when the results came in, something didn't add up. There was a man in the system, someone much older than expected, who showed up as a close relative, a man with no known connection to the family. A mystery. She reached out, politely, carefully. She sent a message that would change everything. "Hi, I think we might be related." Luis, now in his late 70s, was confused. He had never heard of this person. He wasn't adopted, as far as he knew, but the DNA didn't lie. And when she shared her family's story, the little boy who vanished in 1951, the mother who never stopped searching, it all began to click. A few more tests confirmed it. There was no mistake. Luis Albino, the long-lost child of Elena Albino, was alive. He had never been missing from the world, only from the truth. For over 7 decades, he had lived a life unknowingly built on someone else's lies. Can you imagine how that felt? Discovering that your entire identity, everything you thought you knew, was wrong? That there were people who had spent their whole lives wondering if you were dead, when you were just living quietly a few hundred miles away. It's a kind of disorientation that's hard to grasp. The joy of being found, the sorrow of what was lost, the confusion of being both a stranger and a son. But Luis didn't run from it. He faced it. He opened the door to the family he never knew he had, and they welcomed him back with open arms. He may have missed a lifetime with them, but in the twilight of his life, he finally got the chance to reconnect with his roots, to reclaim the name that was stolen, and to know, truly know, who he really was. The breakthrough and reunion. Sometimes, it only takes one spark to ignite the truth. For Luis Albino, that spark came in the form of saliva, sealed in a plastic vial, and mailed to a DNA testing company. It was a routine decision for his niece, a curiosity about family history. But what came back wasn't just a match. It was a miracle. Her results revealed a close relative, a man in his 70s, a stranger, the relationship, uncle. But no one in her family knew this name. No one had ever heard of him. Who was this man? And why did he match their DNA so closely? She could have ignored it. Most people do. But something told her to dig deeper. She messaged him through the platform. Polite, respectful, cautious. After all, reaching out to a complete stranger and suggesting you might be family? That's no small thing. Luis was intrigued but skeptical. He'd never done a DNA test. He hadn't been adopted, or so he thought. But the message stuck with him. And when he responded, a door creaked open on a mystery that had been locked for over 70 years. More testing followed. Names were shared, photos exchanged, and slowly, The puzzle began to form. The pieces were jagged, but they fit. And then one sentence changed everything. "You may be our uncle, our Luis, the little boy who went missing in 1951. At first, Luis was stunned. Could this be real? Could everything he'd ever known be a lie? As more evidence came in, matching birth dates, physical features, and most importantly, that irrefutable DNA, the truth became undeniable. Luis Albino had been found. The news spread to the family like wildfire. Some wept, others couldn't believe it. Siblings who had grown old thinking they'd never see their baby brother again were now preparing to meet him, face to face. And then it happened, in a quiet, emotional moment. Luis stood in front of the people he never knew existed, but who had never stopped loving him. They embraced him, not as a stranger, but as a missing piece finally returned to the picture. There were tears, laughter, silence, and overwhelming joy. They showed him photos, told him stories of his childhood. He learned about his mother, Elena, and how she had fought for decades to keep his memory alive. He learned that he had brothers and sisters who had carried his name like a prayer for him. It was like stepping into a life that had waited patiently in the shadows for over half a century. And Luis, for the first time, saw himself clearly, not as a man he had always been, but as the child who had been lost. It was a moment of collision between past and present, between grief and hope, between a stolen identity and a reclaimed one. For the Albino family, it wasn't just about closure. It was about connection. The years they had lost couldn't be brought back, but the future was still theirs to share. They had found their brother, and he had found the truth. Luis didn't get the chance to reunite with his mother. She passed away never knowing he was still alive. But in that moment, surrounded by the faces of the family she left behind, it felt like part of her was there too. Her hope, her strength, her unwavering love. It was more than a reunion. It was a resurrection. Reflection and closing message. Luis Albino spent nearly 8 decades living under a name that wasn't his, in a life built on a lie. But when the truth finally caught up with him, it didn't arrive with fanfare or headlines. It arrived in a quiet message, a digital whisper that said, "We think you're family." And what does family mean when you've lived without it for so long? When you build a life, a legacy, and an identity without knowing that somewhere out there, someone has kept a picture of your 6-year-old face tucked inside a drawer, hoping you'd return. Luis's story is one of tragedy, but it's also one of extraordinary resilience. He wasn't rescued in childhood. No one stormed in to save him. He didn't remember enough to cry out. He simply lived. He grew. He survived. And in doing so, he became more than just a missing person. He became a symbol of something greater, of the way life can move forward, even when the past has been stolen. When the Albino family embraced Luis again, they weren't just reconnecting with a brother. They were stitching together a wound that had been open for more than 70 years. A wound made not only of loss, but of wondering, of birthdays passed in silence, of questions that never had answers. They told him everything about his mother, Elena, who used to sit at the window and watch the street for hours, hoping he might walk up the sidewalk one day, about how she cooked for him on his birthday even after he was gone, about how she never moved away from Oakland, just in case he ever came home. They showed him her handwriting, how she spelled out his name in the margins of old prayer books. They gave him pieces of the life he never got to live, and in return, he gave them peace. Peace that their brother had survived, that he'd found love, that he'd become a man of strength and service. Luis had lived honorably. He didn't need a backstory to be complete. He had children. He'd stood beside men in battle. He'd run into burning buildings. He'd lost friends. He'd buried loved ones. His story had weight, but now it also had roots. There's a unique kind of pain that comes with finding the truth so late in life. And yet, there's also healing in it. Because even though Luis couldn't get those years back, he could reclaim his name. He could stand in front of his family and say, "I'm home." Not everyone gets that chance. Most missing children aren't found. And of those who are, few come back whole. For every Luis Albino, there are thousands of names etched in time, surrounded by silence, waiting for someone to remember them. But this story, this one, is different. It didn't end in tragedy. It ended with answers. It ended with a man shaking hands with his brothers, with a woman finally able to say, "Uncle, I'm so glad you're here," with a circle that had remained open for 73 years, finally closing. So, what can we take from this? What does Luis's story teach us? It reminds us that identity isn't just a name or a birth certificate. It's the sum of who we are and who we were meant to be. Luis didn't choose the path that led him away from his family, but in the end, that path led back. And that matters. It teaches us that persistence pays off, that a single DNA test, a few clicks and a few drops of saliva can shape the foundation of decades-long mysteries, that technology, for all its noise and distraction, can still be a bridge back to something real. It reminds us of the power of love, of a mother's endless hope, of siblings who never stop wondering, of a niece who saw a name and chose to ask a question others might have ignored. And perhaps most importantly, it tells us that no matter how long the silence lasts, some stories are just waiting for the right person to listen. So maybe that person is you. Maybe you've heard of someone who disappeared. Maybe you have unanswered questions about your own family. Maybe your story is more tangled than you ever realized. Don't ignore that pull. Investigate. Reach out. Ask the uncomfortable questions. Because for every mystery that's solved, there's another heart put at ease, another family made whole, another Luis who might finally be able to say, "Now I know who I am." If this story has moved you, please, don't let it end here. Hit the like button, because that helps this story reach more people. Share it with a friend or a family member who believes in miracles, who believes in justice, or maybe who just needs to know that the truth can still come home after 70 years. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Not for me, but for the stories we haven't told yet, for the families still waiting, for the faces still lost in the crowd. Because somewhere right now, another child is missing, another mother is searching, another niece is uploading her DNA, hoping it unlocks something bigger than herself. And when that match is made, when another lost name is finally found, we'll be here to tell that story too. This was a story of Luis Armando Albino, a boy stolen, a man forgotten, and finally, a family reunited. After 73 years, he is home. Luis's journey reminds us that even the darkest mysteries can one day be brought into the light. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Tap that like button to help more people hear stories that matter. Subscribe so you never miss the next unbelievable true story we uncover. And most importantly, share this video. Share it with someone who believes in family, in hope, and in the power of never giving up. Because somewhere out there, another missing person is waiting to be found. And maybe, just maybe, your share could lead them home. Thanks for watching. Stay curious. Stay compassionate. And until next time, keep searching for the truth.